Hello my dear friends, how is it going? I'm Mari Theriger and today I'll take the opportunity to share in video format an answer to another question by some of my patrons. If Valhalla was in the underworld or not, which is a question that pops up from time to time around here and on the Patreon platform and on my Instagram as well. On the previous video about Hell, the Old Norse underworld and the realm of the dead, I have stated that not all afterlife realms and places for the dead in Norse mythology are situated in the underworld, but there is often a certain perception of that idea, especially given the sources that state that everyone, absolutely everyone, goes to hell and once in there they are sorted out to their rightful places according to their social status and the manner in which they have perished. So, Valhalla could be a hole, indeed, in the underworld, as in the realm of the dead, and it would make some sense, since the sources also state that hell is surrounded by a wall, and in it there are many holes for the dead. But it is not the case with Valhalla, it seems. Even though I haven't done a video solely for Valhalla, not yet, and my apologies, I think a few brief points should be taken into account. Well, first things first, Valhalla is a Victorian misspelling of Valhöll, so from this moment onwards, throughout this video, I shall pronounce it Valhall. So, the conception of Valhall has certainly suffered several transformations, and by the Icelandic poet and politician Snorri Sturluson's hands, 13th century, in his most famous account, the Prose Edda, Valhall has become a sort of paradise, the ideal place for the best of the best, according to Snorri, who very much intended to reimagine Valhall as a paradise of sorts, as it was the afterlife hole for the warrior nobility. So Snorri makes this shift and places Valhall directly in the realm of the gods, high in the heavens, as the single hole of Asgard, home of Odin and famous worldwide today as the Viking heaven, where the brave may live forever, becoming synonymous even with the whole of Norse afterlife itself. However, the sources are quite clear in stating that Valhall was just another hole among many other residences for the dead. The conception of afterlife places as holes for the dead is quite interesting, as it reflects the life of the living in the late Scandinavian Iron Age, the so-called Viking Age. Taking Valhall as an example, it is the projection of the day-to-day reality of the nobility, of the Scandinavian elite. Valhall being a divine or god-sized projection of the great whole of lords and kings, and this continuation of their earthly life upon death, and these halls being the afterlife household and manners of the Scandinavian elites. Such afterlife halls are the places of the dead that remained quite popular and best known from Old Norse myths and afterlife conceptions, because precisely the sources were composed either by members of the elite, professional poets in their great majority, producing such works for the elite to be recited within the space of Scandinavian royalty and nobility and in courts, and or works commissioned by the Scandinavian and Icelandic elites to extol the lives and deeds of that same social group and project it into eternity in the myths. The afterlife reality for other dead people that would not belong to the elite is far harder to discern, but we do get the perception that there were indeed different afterlife places for many different people, not just according to the manner in which they have died, but also their functions and social status within the earthly realm. So Valhall progressively became, in the late Scandinavian Iron Age, the reflection of the earthly life of the Scandinavian elites, and perpetuating their power and privilege after death, further becoming a place of higher importance in the Icelandic Middle Ages, becoming Snorri's attempt to find some rationality in the Old Norse myths to equate with his own religious beliefs and interpretations, Christianity, turning Valhall into a heavenly place directly inserted in the very heavenly realm of the gods, Hosgarður. An attempt by Snorre to position himself on such a place, as he was very much part of a very specific Icelandic elite, thus making the statement that he was worthy and above all others due to his important position within the medieval Icelandic society. Reinterpreting Valhall as a paradise wasn't solely an attempt by Snorre to try to make some Christian sense out of the heathen myths, but also aggrandizing himself by reworking on Valhall as a place of great glory and renown for the elite of which he was very much part of. As you can see, a man with a great ego. Now, according to the written sources, we know that Valhall, is located in the celestial world or realm. However, sometimes it is believed that it would also be located in the underworld. Well, is this true or not? The most famous literary version of Valhall, the Hall of the Dead, comes from the Eddic poem Grimnismal, which does not provide a precise geography as to where this hall is located. Grimnismal, which lists the various abodes of the gods, speaks of Valhall as a place in Gladsheimr, where Odin, under the name of Hroth, chooses those who are slain by weapons, presuming they have died in battle. So, from this, it would appear that Valhall is a hall, indeed, one of many, and this one specifically in Gladsheimr, which doesn't say where it is, but it would not be a dreadful place. As the name indicates, Gladsheimr, the realm of joy, or the bright realm, or home, or field of joy. Snorre, on the other hand, he knew about the poem Grimnismal, yet it is interesting and curious that he specifically chose to say that Gladsheimr was instead a temple erected at Hidavoll by Odin himself, and within there were 12 high seats for 12 gods. Grimnismal further elaborates on Valhall, but let us just take into consideration other details of its geography, which is what we are dealing here today. It says that, or at least we have that perception, that Valhall is in the vicinity of the primordial well Hvergelmir, whence all waters run from. Other sources tell us that Hvergelmir is a spring in Niflheim, which would place it in the north, and Hell, the realm of the dead, is also sometimes situated in Niflheim, due north, but in the underworld. From here, we could take that Valhall isn't far from Hell, but lies in the surface of Niflheim, the land of fog and mists where frost giants live. However, there are several inconsistencies, which is normal throughout the ages, as previously presented on one of my latest videos concerning Hell, the realm of the dead. Hvergelmir is also a spring under the world tree Yggdrasil, so underneath the earth. Although these seem to indicate later conceptions prior to Snorre, of course, but still late when it comes to the Old Norse afterlife and mythological geographies, let's say. And skaldic poetry also mentions the place, Hell and Valhall, etc., without further spatial hints. The point is that this hall would be one of several located in, only the gods know where, until it is finally placed in the land of the gods themselves, Hosgarður, whose location is also not clear in the primary sources. However, Snorre Sturluson refers to this world of the gods clearly in a celestial context. But exactly what was the pre-Christian view in terms of this hall for the dead? There is a debate among scholars, several researchers studying pre-Christian and medieval Scandinavia, that the pre-Christian Norse cosmological view was either horizontal, where all worlds were situated in the same level as the human world, or vertical, where the gods reside in the sky, the humankind in the middle, and the dead in the lower level. But back to the initial question, could Valhall have been situated in the underworld? It could and could not, and most likely it was not. Clearly, there were several conceptions and modifications through the centuries, not only to go in line with the several religious changes and influences, but also according to the earthly reality of the most powerful social groups of the Iron Age, Scandinavia and Nordic Middle Ages, who projected their own social, cultural, political, military and religious reality into the myths themselves, as cognitive constructions that aim to preserve culture through oral tradition, mostly the culture or the reality of the elites. Now, regardless of the cosmology debate, most likely not. Valhall was not in the underworld. The only source we have for this comes from Saxo Grammaticus Gesta Danorum, an idea that Valhall could be in the underworld, where the hero Hadingus visits the land of the dead and encounters a band of warriors who died by the sword and constantly exemplify and show the fame of their death. Saxo was influenced by classical sources, for instance citing the river Styx and placing a big hound or wolf ram at the gates of the underworld, and also Christian literature naming the place Tartarus and Hell, Infernus. Sources that have also influenced Snorre, that helped him to relocate several mythological places and also further elaborating on them. Therefore, the location of these warriors should not be taken into account. Only the pre-Christian concept that they were dead and were still fighting in the afterlife. Some sources indicate that all the dead eventually make their way to Hell, the underworld, and then in there, which is generally seen as the realm of the dead, they will be sent to their after-death places depending on what they were in life. This idea is a bit late and may also have been influenced by classical and Christian sources. Mind you, classical sources translated, rewritten and reworked by Christians, especially noticeable in the Gothic Bible, in an attempt to make Hell, Infernos, an in-between realm, as if it were the purgatory. We know that in pre-Christian Nordic conceptions there would be many halls of gods and also other places for the dead according to their social class and the way they died. It is also true that in the cosmological conception of the Same, who greatly influenced culturally and religiously the Nordic peoples of Scandinavia in the Iron Age and early Middle Ages, there is a concept of the underworld in the sense of being a world or a reality, an existence parallel to the world of the living, where the dead, the double entities of each human and other beings inhabit. But there are no sources that can tell us exactly where Valhall was located. But then, where would this location be? Are there any hints? The best answer so far has been given to us by the German Rudolf Simek. Studying folklore, he discovered that some mountains in southern Sweden are known as Mountains of the Dead, with the name Valhall. For Simek, the older meaning of Hall in Old Norse would not be Hull, the form best known in literature and translations, but Hallr, rock. Thus, Valhall would be the dead of the rock, in reference to the funerary mounds that were where members of the warrior aristocracy were deposited, as well as the nobility from the Iron Age until the beginning of the Viking Age. Several archaeologists have also been considering this interpretation, this hypothesis. The dead would remain in the place of their burial, could be tombs, chambers, deposits, etc. Like the image of Hervor's father, Hangathir, right, resurfacing from inside a megalithic tomb. From this idea comes the concept of the Draugr, the restless dead, for instance, and the holy mountain in Icelandic folklore known as the real physical mountain of Helgafell, to where it is said the dead go after death. Since Hell, the Nordic Hell, originally meant the grave or tomb, the earth beneath our feet, it is possible that Valhall at some point would have been Valhall, literally that which is concealed in the earth as a place for the dead, but the grave, the tomb or the burial mound. The ancient image of the dead who still battle in the afterlife mixes with the whole culture of the late Iron Age in Scandinavia, having its peak in the fullness of the Viking Age, but later it will be much more elaborated on in medieval poetry, reaching the point where Valhall, becomes a celestial kingdom to match Christian models already with Snorre Sturluson in the 13th century. However, I would also like to point out that even if Valhall may have been originally Valhallr, the rock of the dead or the dead of the rock, it is important to point out that there are other translations for Val, which is carrion, making Valhallr the carrion rock. And this changes the concept of Valhall and its possible location, because in several ancient societies, and as an archaeologist myself in Portugal, based in Portugal, I have had contact with what I'm about to say, but in terms of the Atlantic Iberian Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, right? Well, there was the custom of depositing the dead on high places, hills or mountains, so that their flesh would be eaten by birds of prey, taking the flesh of dead warriors high into the heavens and into the other world. And perhaps this is one possible explanation for the idea that some birds are the ancestors, and that's why divination through the flight of birds is possible, because the dead reveal omens, and why there's a lot of bird motifs associated with the dead in Eurasian and Northern African cultures. And this also gives a new meaning to becoming carrion for crows, as Odin's ravens or crows, just like Valkyries, Valkyriur, pick the dead warriors from the battlefield, literally a reference to birds eating corpses of once warriors. This could either mean that originally Valhall was the field in which a battle had taken place, but it would be the field post-battle. Either the dead were buried in there in mass graves, and that is Valhall within the earth, or just the place became sacred, hence the reason why in the earlier poems Valhall is said to be located in Gladsheimr, the realm or field or home of joy, as the field of carnage is taken back by nature once the battle is over, and there is beauty and renewal. Quite poetic. Or it could mean that Valhall was Valhallr, the carrion rock, literally a hill or mountain, a high place where the dead warriors would be left in the open to be eaten and taken by birds of prey, as follows older customs seen in the European Bronze Age. So Valhallr would be such a rock, as a high place, and the dead would not specifically go to the inside of the rock, but on it, also following the several mythological conceptions of many cultures that deal with mountains and hills and as sacred places and homes of the deities and temples for the deities, especially notable throughout European Iron Age among several Celtic peoples, including Celt-Iberians and other non-Celtic and Celtic and some mixtures, non-Celtic and Celtic peoples, but with similar cultures and belief systems such as the Lusitanians, Galicians, Gauls, Picts, Old Irish, Welsh, and so on and so forth. For instance, in my own country, there isn't one single hill and or mountain that isn't associated with a specific deity, a pagan deity of the past, and many of which with Celtic and or Celticized names. The conception of Valhall as Valhallr, carrion rock, may have originated in earlier customs of leaving the dead warriors on high places to be eaten and taken away by birds of prey into the afterlife. Something to think about, of course. I do hope you have enjoyed this one, and may it be useful in some way, somehow. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, tack för idag. Thanks for today. Obrigado por hoje.